Hey, welcome back, Chicago. You're listening to the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. What a fascinating discussion with the founders of Chicago Furniture Bank. Certainly, I hope that all of our listeners will get in touch with them. But I'm thrilled to be joined by another fascinating, interesting entrepreneur. My next guest, Mark Grazman, is a very accomplished entrepreneur and venture capitalist with an established track record of launching, scaling, and leading successful companies. Mark, welcome to the program, and you've brought a visitor in as well.
I have. I'm happy to have my 8-year-old Stella here with me.
And business partner?
And boss.
Boss.
Let's be honest.
Okay. Not a partner quite. Yeah. Boss. Everybody needs to know their place in life. Perhaps that's one of the lessons that we'll talk about. So, Mark, you and I have been connected for a while, and I've watched just in this short period of time your involvement in a number of companies. I want to talk about you, and I want to hopefully share some lessons and stories for aspiring entrepreneurs. Mark, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in St. Louis, studied public policy and literature, and 3 days after I graduated, I went off overseas thinking I could do good things in the world, and spent 10 years overseas. And there, my goal was nonprofit and public policy, but I learned business and restructuring and fixing companies because that meant fixing communities in former Soviet Union. And then eventually I missed being a part of a community more than just being a businessman. And I had a sick father in St. Louis, so I came back to the U.S. and have been here now for 14 years.
So your bachelor's degree is in public policy, and I understand also in literature. So very, very interesting, interesting information. I'm curious how that has propelled your career, or has it?
It absolutely has. And I get that question and raised eyebrows quite a bit. In my world, everything is a story. People are stories, businesses are stories. They have plots and subplots and characters. And so actually the literature degree helped me immensely in looking at everything and everyone around me, trying to find out what's everyone's unique perspective on it.
So over your 20 plus years in your career, you've been involved in founding companies and you've been involved in running companies. I'm curious where you feel that there are themes in successful organizations. What are the areas that or the people, the attributes of people or the attributes of companies that you think lead to success? Nothing like starting with a tough question over there.
Love it. So, and if we're talking about entrepreneurship, I'll share some advice that one of my very important career mentors gave me. So it was the first time I was leaving working for somebody else, and I went to him to tell him for an hour or two, I was excited to share what I was doing. He stopped me 10 minutes in and said, okay, that's enough of that project. Now we're going to talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur. And what he told me was, you've got to work hard, be smart, and you've got to have some luck. And he said, you can work hard and be smart, and not everything is going to go your way. So his advice to me was, be ready to swing for the fence 10 times. And if you make it on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, consider it luck. And that really steeled me where I was going in ready to be so excited about the opportunity I had as a 28-year-old to start my own company. And he helped me understand it wasn't that company, it was me that was the asset. And so instead of getting too excited or upset about early successes or failures, it was that doggedness to just stay at it that I think really makes an entrepreneur successful.
And do you believe that companies grow? Some companies grow and some companies fail. Do you believe that ultimately it's the same attributes within large companies and small companies are there some common denominators and themes that you've seen?
Actually, more the opposite. So I'm sure there are some common denominators, but from my perspective, taking something, if you think of inertia, getting something that's not moving to start moving is a really unique effort. Now, maintaining movement once something is there is completely different. So I actually will often see entrepreneurs and friends that are good at one of those phases and not necessarily at the other phase. So I think important theme through all of it is knowing what your strengths are and making sure whether you start as a 1 or 2 person company or nonprofit, as the impressive guys that were just here did, it is knowing what you're good at, knowing your weaknesses, and making sure you find people around you to support you, lead you, and fill those gaps.
For you personally, you as I mentioned, have been involved in running companies and founding companies. Being in business is really it's everything. You're involved in the finance, you're involved in the sales, you're involved in the people side of things. There's a lot that goes into running a business. For you personally, what is the most interesting and, dare I say, fun part of being in business?
Yeah, so for me, it's easy. There's two things. So one is the strategy. So to look and say, what does the world need? What's my customer's pain point? What's a consumer's pain point? To find a gap in what people need and then find the way to deliver the service or the product or the software to meet that need. But that doesn't last all that long. That becomes, 5-10% of the job after the original founding. And then it's to be a coach. I mean, I view the core of my job is to bring out the best in people. So I joke with my sales teams that, my job is to sell the company, not to a buyer, but it's first to investors and second to the right talent. And when we get the right talent on the bus, as they say, there's nothing that can stop us.
So something that I think about and talk about a lot is the sort of balance of being proactive versus reactive. Often day to day, I know you and I have gotten together many times, and life comes at you while you're sitting together. The phone rings, and then somebody else taps you on the shoulder, and somebody wants to talk to you, and easily that can consume the average entrepreneur, business owner, successful leader. Pretty much, it's all encompassing. You can spend each day, every day, and never move the needle forward. At the same time, I've also seen many people that are strategists, and they spend so much time thinking, planning, and writing plans and thinking of scenarios all the time, and they plan so much, and they never actually get an opportunity to operate. What is your advice for an entrepreneur in terms of how to balance those two areas?
It's a great question, and at any given moment or even any given week, it can be really difficult to do because you have so much coming at you. Early in my career, I read a book that's, I think, been out there for 30 years. I forget the exact title, but the theme was, are you working on the business or in the business? And that, to me, created a really stark divide. So if I'm working on the business, I'm changing something. I'm doing something new that doesn't exist versus in where I'm being reactive to the day-to-day needs of employees, customers, etc. And so to me, I would make a conscious choice and then evaluate myself every week. So I give myself a half an hour at the end of a week, at the end of the day, Friday, and a half an hour at the beginning of the week on Monday to not react to anybody's emails or phone calls or conversations, and to just take stock and say, what balance do I need next week of on versus in? And then on Friday, I look back and I evaluate what was my percentage and what were the 2 or 3 or 4, and I never go past 4 most important things I had to do that week. And I make sure that those are not little things, but big things.
So certainly I'm hearing another bit of advice as well, which is regarding time management. And it sounds like you're suggesting at times you just need to block yourself off and allow that time to think.
Absolutely. And, and even more than time management, because at any one moment you can justify the emergency or reacting to the person in front of you. It's really making a conscious choice about how you want to manage yourself because you're the boss by definition. And then key for me is looking every week at how I did managing myself.
Very interesting. Interesting advice. And believe it or not, we don't have that much time left, but I want to squeeze in a couple of questions regarding the current climate and how things are currently. Certainly in your career, you've seen technology advances, and I know that you've adapted and embraced technology changes, but you've also watched the economy up and down. And the reason I ask this question is I admire I've watched some of the things that you've been involved in. What is your impression of where things are at right now in terms of the world of entrepreneurship and Chicago entrepreneurship specifically?
We've seen, I'm pleased to say, I've seen a lot of change over the last 12, 15 years in Chicago entrepreneurship. Things like 1871 and Matter. There's an ecosystem now of angel investors and of entrepreneurs that are trying to do it. Frankly, 10 years ago when I was starting companies here, once that company got traction, most funders were on one of the coasts and would try to get Chicago entrepreneurs to move. And that still happens, but it's less often. And, in my company today, Mail Control, we've been able to raise quite a bit of money with a lot of support from folks here in Chicago, which feels really good and wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago.
Interesting. And I agree with what you're saying about the coast. It's funny. I've had conversations with business people outside of the country, and they ask me where Chicago is, which is interesting. But certainly things have changed and things have improved. So, Mark, indeed, we are out of time, and I want to make sure that folks can get a hold of you. You're on LinkedIn, I believe.
Absolutely.
Is that the best way for people to get a hold of you?
It is.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Mark Grazman, let's spell out your name so people can find you.
Grazman.
And Mark is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Mail Control. I encourage you to look that up. But Mark Grazman, thank you for the advice, the candidness, and the information regarding your career. I look forward to having you back on.
Thanks, Shalom.
Absolutely. And coming up, we've got more business, jobs, and entrepreneurship.
On Tuesday, January